Hi everyone and welcome in our channel. Let me introduce the topic of the week, the suffragette movement, and let's see after how this movement impacted directly the English law system. Let me be more precise about where am I standing today. Just in front of the Pankhurst Center, known as the iconic site of women's activism. Emmeline Pankhurst and her family lived at number 62 Nelson Street from 1898 until 1907 here in Manchester. In the first meeting of the movement that became known as the suffragette took place in this house. The Pankhurst Center is the only place where members of the public can visit the former house of the Pankhurst family, and it's the only museum dedicated to the history of women fought the right to vote. Our topic of the day. But before getting the heart of the matter, let's start off the beginning, and a little story time is in order. Who was Emmeline and her party? The woman that will accompany us is Emmeline Pankhurst, as some may have guessed. She was a famous suffragette in England, known as an activist woman in the early 20th century, who under the banners "Vote for Women" fought for the right to vote in public elections, the women's suffrage. The term refers in particular to members of the British movement's social and political union founded in 1903 by Emmeline Pankhurst, a date to remember. On the 10th of October of 1903, Emmeline Pankhurst and her daughters founded the Women's Social and Political Union. Like I already said, Emmeline was a member of the Independent Labour Party, a woman of authoritarian character and strong commitment. Emmeline Pankhurst wanted her party to found on the concrete actions. Their slogan was "Actions, not words." In 1905, Emmeline's daughters and friends were ejected from a political meeting for raising the issue of women's right to vote by raising their voices, because no one would deny to answer them. Christabel spat at a policeman. This disrespect is immediately turned into an offense. The young women are arrested and imprisoned. The whole press is talking about it, and the movement is growing. Emmeline Pankhurst became aware of the power of demonstrations and actions of great powers and decided to follow her daughter's advice and opt for a strategy of confrontations. Those who are called suffragettes were from now called the public intentions by trying to make people talking about it at any cost, for good or not. It is almost a moral duty for these women to break the law, since they were made without them and against them. What about the militant action? Initially, the WSPU tactics were to cause disruption and civil law disobedience, such as the rush on Parliament in October 1908, when it encouraged the public to join them in an attempt to invade the House of Commons. However, the lack of government actions led the WSPU to undertake more violent acts, including attacks on property and law breaking, which resulted in imprisonment and hunger strikes. These tactics attract a great deal of attention to the campaign for Vote for Women. Like many suffragettes, Emmeline was arrested on numerous occasions over the next few years and went on hunger strike herself. resulting in violent force feeding. In 1913, in response to the wave of hunger strikes, the government passed what became known as the Cat and Mouse Act. Hunger striking prisoners were released until they grew strong again and then re-arrested. The legal and the constitutional support these women had. Not everyone who campaigned for women's suffrage is in favor of activist actions. Moderate women's organizations such as the National Union of Women's Suffrage Society (NUWSS), led by Millicent Fawcett, have played a key role in building a legal and a constitutional support for women's empowerment, but their contributions have often been overshadowed by high-profile actions of women's suffragists. About impacts of the suffrage movement. The women's suffrage development opened numerous entryways for the ladies in England. The episode of the First World War I in 1914 drove to a suspension of party legislative issues counting the aggressor suffragette campaign. In 1918, a fusion government passed the Representation of People Act of 1918. So, what is this law? The Representation of the People Act of 1918 was an important law because it allowed women to vote for the first time. But even after this act, men and women still didn't have the same rights when it came to politics. Up until 1918, women hadn't been allowed to be in the parliament, but a different law was passed in the same year as the Representation of People Act, which changed these two. On December of 1918, the first woman was elected in the House of Commons. The law said that women over the age of 30 who occupied a house or were married to someone who did could now vote. These meant 8.5 million women, which correspond about 2 in every 5 women in the UK. It wasn't enough, but then it was until a law called the Equal Franchise Act in 1928 that suffrage was extending to all women over the age of 21, meaning that women finally had the same voting right as men. And about today's impacts, I think the suffrage movement is still relevant today, as women still fight for equality in many aspects of everyday life. Carrie Gracie is an example of these women who protest for equal pay. She quit her job as an editor in the BBC News and revealed that men in the same level of work were being paid as much as 50% more than their female counterparts. Or even Malala Yousafzai, who fights for the education of women in other countries, has suffered physically as a consequence of these. No one should have to experience pain while fighting for something they believed in. Her actions show that women still need to work hard for things that should be legal now. These powerful words from Hillary Clinton express what many people think but do not say. The rights of women and girls are the unfinished business of the 21st century. So, Thank you for listening to me today. I hope you enjoyed the subject of the day, and if you have any question, don't be afraid to ask them in our website. Goodbye.